No one calls it murder at first. They call it a tragedy, an accident, a failure of the body to keep going. Words chosen not for accuracy, but for comfort. Emma Hartley died before anyone was ready to say why. 10 years old, found in her own basement on a Tuesday morning when the school bell rang without her. By the time I heard her name, the town had already decided what it needed to believe. That's usually how it starts, not with evidence, but with relief. Relief that the answer might be simple, relief that it might belong to someone everyone already knows. The house looked like it had been designed to disappear. Cream-colored siding faded by years of polite neglect. A porch with 2 chairs positioned for conversation that never happened. A lawn trimmed just enough to avoid comment. The kind of place you pass every day and forget the moment it leaves your sight. That ordinariness became part of the story later, used as proof that nothing bad could happen there. But ordinary places don't prevent violence, they hide it, especially when the violence doesn't announce itself. The welfare check came in at 9:17 a.m. The school had done what schools do now, automated calls, unanswered messages, a system that flags absence without understanding it. Emma had missed 2 days. That alone wasn't alarming. Kids get sick, parents manage. But a neighbor noticed the car hadn't moved. Mrs. Patricia Voss, retired, observant, the kind of woman whose days are measured by routines she didn't invent. She told the dispatcher she had a bad feeling. That phrase survived into the official log, stripped of context and urgency. A bad feeling isn't evidence, but it's often the first honest thing in a case. The front door was unlocked, not broken, not forced, just open to whoever expected to be there. Inside, the house held its breath, windows closed, air stale. The living room arranged with intention, blanket folded, cushions straightened, no sign of struggle. 2 coffee mugs sat in the sink, rinsed but abandoned before washing, a pause mid-routine. Officer Ramirez would later say the house felt wrong, though he couldn't explain why. That kind of instinct doesn't age well in reports. It gets edited out. They found Diane Hartley upstairs, sitting on the edge of the bed as if waiting for instructions. Same clothes she'd worn to a school meeting days earlier, hands folded, posture calm. When asked where her daughter was, she didn't hesitate or dramatize. She turned her head slightly and said, "Downstairs." One word, no explanation, no plea, just direction. And when Officer Chen stepped onto the basement stairs, flashlight cutting into darkness where the light bulb no longer worked, the silence that followed felt practiced, as if whatever had happened there was already finished, and the house had agreed to keep it that way. The basement smelled of cold concrete and old paint, a smell that doesn't belong to children. The flashlight beam found Emma near the far wall, her body positioned with an almost careful restraint, pajamas neat, no blood, no sign of a fall, no clutter disturbed around her. She lay on her side, facing away from the stairs, as if the room itself had turned its back. Officer Chen knew before he checked for a pulse. There's a stillness that isn't sleep. It's definitive. He called it in, and the house changed its role. What didn't fit were the details people brushed past because they didn't scream. The light bulb at the top of the stairs wasn't just burned out, it was gone, twisted free. Darkness is a choice when it's that deliberate. The concrete floor showed faint scuffs near where Emma lay, too linear to be a fall, too soft to be a struggle. Repositioning leaves that kind of mark. The furnace hadn't run all night. The basement was cold, but not dangerously so. Cold enough to slow a body, to quiet it, to make time feel elastic. Upstairs, Emma's room was tidy in the way children make things tidy when they expect company. Her bed was made,
Her shoes were lined by the back door, laces tucked in. Children don't do that before sneaking out. They do it when they're told to. On her desk, a tablet rested where it had been left, screen smudged with fingerprints. Activity logs showed it had been opened at 9:12 p.m. A drawing app, one incomplete line saved and never returned to. Children abandon drawings for only a few reasons. Fear is one, authority is another. The first suspects arrived pre-packaged, the mother already in the house, the absence of a father, a blank space people rushed to fill, a neighbor who lived alone, anyone close enough to satisfy the need for proximity. Diane Hardley's calm became the focal point. Calm unnerves people when they expect collapse. It gets translated into guilt because grief that doesn't perform makes observers uncomfortable. During the 6-hour interrogation, Diane answered plainly, no embellishment, no defense. She admitted to mistakes that sounded small until they were stacked together. Missed doctor visits, days out of school, omissions that look monstrous only in hindsight. When asked why she didn't call for help after finding Emma, she said she was already gone. Final, as if she had crossed a line in her own mind and couldn't step back. The timeline refused to behave. Diane said she last saw Emma alive at dinner. Soup, half a bowl. Stomach bugs don't end that neatly. Children who eat are improving or being encouraged. After that, the night went quiet. Too quiet. No neighbors reported a scream. No doors slamming. No frantic footsteps. The house absorbed the hours without complaint. The autopsy complicated things instead of clarifying them. Dr. Linda Sokolov found no trauma, no bruises, no fractures, mild dehydration, signs of recent gastrointestinal illness, nothing lethal. Toxicology would take time. In the meantime, she ruled the cause of death undetermined. That should have slowed the machine. It didn't. 3 days later, a leak found its way to the press. Child Protective Services had been involved. 2 reports, both about school absences, both closed. Context evaporated overnight. What remained was a pattern people could understand. Isolation, neglect, a mother who didn't do enough. The narrative tightened. By the time toxicology came back clean, no poisons, no drugs, the story had outgrown the evidence. Diane was charged with felony child neglect, not murder, something easier to prove. The law doesn't need certainty to punish negligence. It needs a shape that fits. Diane fit. I started digging months later, retired but not done. I requested reports, I visited the house, I talked to teachers, and I realized no one was asking about Emma. The picture in the news was 2 years old. The girl who died was pale, withdrawn, exhausted. Teachers remembered her falling asleep in class, asking to sit near the door, flinching at raised voices. None of it rose high enough to stop anything. And then there was the basement. Not a playroom, not a den. Concrete, exposed beams, storage. No reason for a child to be there at night, unless she was hiding or unless someone told her to go there.
I interviewed Mrs. Patricia Voss again, this time without uniforms or recorders. People remember more when they don't feel evaluated. She lived 3 houses down, her kitchen window facing the Hartley driveway. Routine had trained her eyes. She noticed patterns because her days depended on them. She told me she'd seen Diane's car every morning the week before Emma died. Same spot, same angle. What changed was the other car, a dark sedan parked on the street,
engine off, no one getting out. It appeared twice, once in the evening, once early in the morning. She hadn't thought much of it then, people come and go. But when I asked if she'd told the police, she shook her head. No one had asked. That omission mattered. In neighborhoods like that, unfamiliar cars stand out, not because of danger, but because of sameness. I canvassed the block quietly. Another neighbor remembered the sedan idling longer than necessary one night. A third recalled seeing it pull away just before school buses arrived. No plates, no faces, just timing. Timing is never neutral. I requested private camera footage, doorbells, garages. One camera caught the sedan stopped for 12 minutes, engine running, driver never exiting, waiting. Waiting has a posture when you know how to recognize it. Phone records filled another gap. Diane's calls were unremarkable. Family, school, overdue bills, the kind of noise that proves nothing. But in the week before Emma died, there were 3 incoming calls from a prepaid number. No name, all under a minute, no voicemail. Instruction calls don't linger. When I tried to trace the number, it was disconnected. Disposable phones aren't used by people with nothing to hide. They're used by people who don't want conversations remembered. Emma's tablet told a quieter story. 2 nights before her death, it briefly paired with an unknown device, a Bluetooth handshake, seconds long, enough to exchange nothing obvious, enough to be noticed if you're looking. The signal originated close to the house, within range. That matters. Someone had been near enough to connect, near enough to be familiar, near enough to be trusted or obeyed. Children don't connect devices accidentally at night. They respond to prompts. The prosecution never touched any of this. It didn't help their case. Their case depended on narrowing, not widening. Diane's omissions were easier to explain to a jury than a stranger who left no marks and no name. The story needed a center. Diane provided one by staying, by not performing, by waiting. That choice, more than anything else, made her useful.
When I spoke to Emma's teachers again, the tone changed. Off the record, patterns surfaced. Emma wasn't disruptive, she wasn't defiant. She was compliant to the point of invisibility. Pale, withdrawn, frequently absent. When present, exhausted. One teacher remembered Emma asking to sit near the door, not for attention, but for orientation. Another recalled her flinching when an adult raised a voice in the hallway. Children don't invent that kind of vigilance. They learn it from repetition. The school counselor remembered a hallway conversation weeks before Emma died, not logged, not escalated. Emma had asked whether adults were allowed to make kids keep secrets. The counselor gave a general answer, encouraged her to talk to her parents. The moment passed. That's how warning signs survive, by being small enough to ignore. No single exchange demands action. It's the accumulation that matters, and accumulation is easy to miss when responsibility is shared. I went back to the basement, measured the stairs, narrow, steep. The missing bulb meant darkness from the first step. Someone unfamiliar would hesitate. Someone directed wouldn't. The scuff marks near the far wall suggested repositioning, not collapse. Emma hadn't fallen. She'd been placed. The furnace room was cold, but not lethal. Cold enough to slow a body already compromised by illness. Cold enough to quiet breathing. Cold enough to let time stretch without interruption. The mistake that cost Emma her life wasn't a single act. It was a sequence of reasonable decisions made by people who believed they were protecting boundaries. The school didn't escalate because there was no proof.
CPS closed the file because there was no abuse. Police narrowed their focus because they needed a case that would hold. Each decision made sense alone. Together, they created a corridor where someone else could operate without scrutiny. Someone who didn't need to force a door or raise a voice. Someone who relied on routine, authority, and the fact that children are taught to listen. By the time the system realized what it had missed, it was already prosecuting the wrong person for the wrong reasons. The space where the real answers lived had been sealed by consensus. Cases don't collapse because of malice. They collapse because alignment feels safer than doubt. The motive didn't arrive cleanly. It never does. It arrived through paperwork, a zoning change, an easement adjustment, a utility project rerouted at the last minute. The kind of administrative movements that never make headlines because they're framed as progress. Emma's neighborhood sat above something valuable enough to attract attention and quiet enough to escape it. Survey markers had appeared weeks before her death. Contractors walked the streets with clipboards and practiced indifference. Children notice changes adults dismiss. They ask questions. They repeat answers to the wrong people. Once you see that, the earlier pieces settle into place. The dark sedan wasn't there to watch the family. It was there to confirm routines. The short calls weren't threats. They were coordination. The basement wasn't chosen only for secrecy. It was chosen because it was already framed as out of bounds, a place where compliance could be mistaken for choice. What happened there didn't require violence the way people imagine it. Fear and illness do enough on their own. A raised voice, a command not to move, a light removed so darkness does the rest. The truth was dangerous because it implicated more than one set of hands, not a single predator, but a series of permissions granted by neglect and haste. If the case widened, it wouldn't stop with a stranger. It would brush against contractors, supervisors, and municipal offices. That's why the charge chosen didn't require explaining a cause of death. Neglect is easier to prove than interference. It sounds moral, it feels protective, and it keeps projects on schedule.
The trial unfolded the way these trials always do when the facts refuse to cooperate. Slowly, selectively. The prosecution didn't try to explain how Emma died. They didn't have to. Their case was built around what Diane Hartley failed to do rather than what anyone else might have done. Missed appointments, delayed calls, absences framed as indifference. Each omission was presented as a brick. Together, they built a wall high enough to keep doubt out. The defense tried to widen the frame. They brought up the autopsy, the undetermined cause of death, the lack of physical evidence. They mentioned the missing light bulb, the basement, the timeline that didn't fit. It didn't land. Jurors don't like uncertainty. They like responsibility. Diane sat quietly through it all, her posture unchanged, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the room. To the jury, that read as detachment. To me, it read as exhaustion. People in shock don't argue. They conserve what little structure they have left. Media coverage flattened everything. Headlines don't tolerate nuance. A mother charged, a child dead. The CPS reports resurfaced daily, stripped of their conclusions and repackaged as warnings ignored. Commentators speculated freely. Online forums sharpened their theories until they resembled certainty. The idea that something else had happened, that someone else might be involved, was dismissed as distraction. Conspiracies are easier to mock than systems, and mocking ends conversations faster than evidence ever could. When the verdict came back guilty, there was no reaction in the room.
No gasps, no relief, just a quiet settling like dust after movement stops. Diane was sentenced to 4 years for felony child neglect, less than the maximum, enough to feel proportional. Proportionality matters more than truth in courtrooms. It gives everyone permission to move on. After sentencing, the file was closed, evidence returned or destroyed. Leads deemed non-viable were archived. The dark sedan never appeared in any official summary. The prepaid calls were listed as untraceable and forgotten. Emma's tablet logs were preserved, but never contextualized. The system did what systems do best once pressure lifts. It simplified.
Diane served her sentence quietly. No appeals, no interviews, no letters to editors. When she was released, she left town with a single suitcase and no forwarding address. That absence became another point of speculation for people who needed closure. To me, it was consistency. She had learned what attention costs. Staying visible hadn't saved her the first time. The house was sold within months. The basement was refinished. Drywall covered concrete. New lighting replaced the missing bulb. Fresh paint erased scuff marks no one remembered noticing. Neighbors told themselves the renovation was progress, that the past had been corrected. They stopped talking about Emma except in softened phrases. That poor girl, such a shame. Phrases that require no follow-up. The utility project resumed under a different contractor. Timelines adjusted, paperwork rerouted. No connection was ever made publicly. None needed to be. Projects don't confess, they continue. Municipal records show the change as a footnote, a line item that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't looking for it. I filed my notes away without ceremony. No agency wanted them, no editor asked for them. They didn't fit the finished story. That's the part people misunderstand about unsolved cases. They don't end with mystery, they end with disinterest. Once the narrative is stable, new information feels like interference rather than illumination. Emma's name surfaces occasionally in databases, undetermined, closed. The language suggests neutrality. It isn't neutral, it's a decision to let alignment stand in for accountability, to accept that no single action rose high enough to challenge the outcome, even if the outcome itself remained unexplained.
What stayed with me wasn't the basement or the body. It was the ease with which attention was redirected. How quickly a mother became a substitute for an answer. How efficiently doubt was managed when someone convenient could be blamed. That efficiency is the real danger. It teaches institutions what works. Emma Hartley didn't die because she was unloved. She died because too many people succeeded at avoiding inconvenience. Each decision was small, each delay reasonable, each omission defensible. Together, they formed a corridor someone else walked down without resistance. That's the shape these cases take when they're allowed to finish themselves. The final thought doesn't come with anger. It comes with recognition. Evil doesn't always arrive with intent sharp enough to name. Sometimes it arrives as alignment of schedules, of authority, of silence. When that happens, the wrong person becomes the answer because the right one would make too much noise. Long after the tape comes down and the house is sold, that alignment remains, waiting for the next ordinary place, for the next child whose questions travel farther than anyone expected, for the next moment when consensus feels safer than truth. And when it happens again, it won't announce itself. It never does. It will look like procedure, like progress, like nothing worth stopping for. The official report read the way reports always do when they're meant to settle rather than explain. Clean paragraphs, passive language, no verbs that required a subject with intent. Emma Hartley's name appeared alongside dates, measurements, findings that led nowhere. Undetermined cause, undetermined manner, closed. Those words don't describe uncertainty. They describe fatigue, a collective decision to stop asking questions that don't fit inside standard margins. I compared the report to my notes and found the gaps more telling than the content. The missing bulb was listed as non-functional lighting. The Bluetooth pairing wasn't mentioned at all. The counselor's hallway conversation didn't exist on paper. The private camera footage wasn't requested, therefore wasn't excluded. It simply never entered the room. That's how inconvenient facts are handled when no one wants to argue against them. They're left outside the process until they lose their temperature. There was a meeting I was never invited to, but I heard about it later. City officials, legal counsel, a conversation about exposure. Not liability in the criminal sense, but disruption, delays, questions that would require answers that didn't exist yet. The consensus wasn't malicious, it was practical. Practicality is often mistaken for neutrality. It isn't. It's a preference for outcomes that preserve momentum. Diane Hartley's case became a reference point. Prosecutors cited it in trainings as an example of accountability without certainty. Judges referenced it when discussing proportionality. No one mentioned Emma except as context. That's how the center of a case moves. The victim becomes background noise once the system finds a rhythm it can maintain. I thought about contacting Diane after her release. I didn't. Not because I lacked questions, but because I knew what answers would cost her. Some people survive by shrinking the perimeter of their lives. Expanding it again for someone else's closure can be an act of cruelty. Silence had already taken enough from her.
Time does what it always does. It smooths edges. Neighbors forget specifics. Teachers retire. Administrators transfer. The utility project finishes and disappears into infrastructure no one thinks about unless it fails. The house changes hands again. New owners plant flowers. Children play in the yard. The basement becomes a room with a purpose, which is how people convince themselves a space has been redeemed. Emma's name appears occasionally in data sets, attendance audits, CPS statistics, lists of cases with undetermined outcomes. She becomes a number that supports no conclusion. That's the quietest kind of disappearance, not the one that alarms people, but the one that reassures them nothing needs to be done. I revisited the block one last time, years later. Mrs. Voss had moved. The doorbell camera that caught the sedan was gone, replaced by a newer model pointed elsewhere. Progress rearranges memory. I stood where the car had waited and counted the minutes again. 12, long enough to confirm a routine, long enough to receive a call, long enough to leave without being remembered. The thought that returned wasn't anger, it was clarity. Cases like this don't fail because of a single corrupt decision. They fail because alignment rewards silence more reliably than truth. Each person involved can justify their role. Each justification makes the next one easier. By the time someone realizes what's been built, it's already load-bearing. People ask why I keep notes on closed cases. I don't tell them it's because closure is a story we tell ourselves to sleep. The work doesn't end when a file is archived. It ends when the conditions that allowed it are changed. That almost never happens. It's easier to believe the past is finished than to accept it's instructive. When people ask what evil looks like, they expect something that announces itself.
A face, a motive, a moment you can point to and say, there, this was it. But that's not how it usually works. More often, it looks like alignment, like cooperation, like everyone doing their job well enough to avoid asking the question that would slow things down. The wrong person became the answer because the right one would have required noise, and noise disrupts schedules, it invites scrutiny, it costs time. Emma's case teaches that lesson efficiently. It shows how little force is needed when consensus does the heavy lifting. Long after the house is sold and the basement is painted, that lesson remains, waiting, not for guilt, but for convenience, waiting for the next ordinary place where a child's compliance will be mistaken for choice, waiting for the next time silence feels safer than doubt. And when it happens again, it won't sound like a crime. It will sound like procedure.